Is Baldur's Gate 3 the future of Dungeons & Dragons? Well, kind of. At least it sure seems that way. Welcome back to Above the Table, a fairly new channel where we discuss what's going on in the vast world of fantasy and science fiction releases with a special focus on tabletop gaming, though we hardly stop there. Okay, so maybe Baldur's Gate 3 isn't the future of Dungeons & Dragons, but it's undoubtedly become a huge part of the future of the 50-year fantasy TTRPG franchise that now spans across just about every media form it possibly can. Wizards of the Coast seems to be well aware of this fact and has even integrated some of Baldur's Gate 3's ingenuity into D&D in a very real way by allowing the video game to influence a rule change in the 2024 Player's Handbook. BG3's influence certainly doesn't stop there, though. Wizards of the Coast is also continually utilizing the game's beloved characters seemingly in as many ways as they can, which is a really smart move on their behalf in regards to longevity and driving interest in the franchise. Examples of this fact are as obvious as the Emperor decorating the cover of the upcoming Monster Manual and Astarion popping up as a cameo appearance and artwork in the newer version of the Player's Handbook, to an increase in officially licensed merchandise this year with Magic the Gathering decks featuring Astarion and Karlach, a collection of pre-painted miniatures from WizKids, and multiple waves of plushes and vinyl figures from U2s. Wizards of the Coast are also eager to use these characters in real-life scenarios and have repeatedly featured the actors behind some of the favorite characters in Baldur's Gate 3 in live actual play performances at conventions this year, the latest of which took place at MGM Comic-Con in London this past weekend, this time featuring Neil Newbon, Samantha Bayart, Theo Solomon, and Deborah Wild in an adventure called What We Do in the Shadow-Cursed Lands. And it helped serve as the world debut of the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's clear that Baldur's Gate 3 has had a profound impact on Dungeons & Dragons as a whole, and that its presence will continue to resonate throughout the franchise in its future. Not that that's a problem, of course, as folks continue to adore party members like the layered and complex vampire that took the internet by storm before the game's full release had even made its way into the world to God's favorite princess.
My, this place is fun.
And while it's certainly okay with Baldur's Gate 3 fans to continue to see these characters in as many places as we can, it may be indicative of a larger problem going on at Wizards of the Coast. This reliance on external sources for characters and stories fans can glom onto and be incredibly passionate toward may not be a great thing for Wizards after all. It's been a long time since Dungeons & Dragons fans have seen a homegrown hero, so to speak, come out of Wizards' created content. And the icons of the franchise in recent years have come from sources like BG3, Dragonlance, and of course Drizzt. Wizards' seeming inability to create their own characters that win over the hearts of the masses becomes a major problem when taking into account that these external sources are not permanent when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons. This means the characters that these external studios create have a limited amount of time to enjoy their moment in the spotlight before someone at Wizards of the Coast has to try to come up with new adventures and storylines for them as the third-party companies move on to other projects, such as the case with Larion Studios opting not to continue forward with Baldur's Gate 4. As we've seen by the fact that Wizards of the Coast is struggling to create these original stories and characters already, what happens if they don't get lucky with another critical darling game containing a strong cast of characters to carry D&D on its back for a bit? In previous years, Wizards has been struggling for marketable characters, with the majority of the franchise's marketing hanging entirely on Drizzt, whose author R.A. Salvatore has been very clear about a desire to not work on these stories multiple times over the last couple of decades. So while Baldur's Gate 3 may be a piece of the future of Dungeons & Dragons for now, and we wouldn't expect that to change anytime soon, there will more than likely come a day when the shiny new toy appeal does start to wear off from them. And what will Wizards use to sell new books, make new content, drive masses to actual play performances, and host streams when this day comes? In our opinion, that's a huge question lingering over Wizards of the Coast right now. As Wizards struggles to internally create characters that resonate with fans on the scale characters created by Larion Studios and more sources like Critical Role, is it possible we'll see them turn toward licensing out the franchise more for additional publishers and developers to take a crack at making magic with these characters? Just exactly what the future holds for Dungeons & Dragons will remain to be seen, but here at Above the Table, we wouldn't expect to see the BG3 characters fade into the background anytime soon. As always, thanks for giving this video a watch, and if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.